thanks a million for doing this, first of all. Appreciate you taking the time out. Um, do you like sometimes I find when I talk to people who are really into like specific areas of focus within strength and fitness, they can be kind of weird about like what they put in their body and stuff. Do you drink coffee?
It's funny you say that, man. First of all, thanks for having me. I appreciate the invite. This is great. It's funny you say that because I definitely don't drink coffee, and it's not because I'm concerned about putting too much caffeine or anything like that. Really, it's just how my body responds to caffeine, and I would say I'm a total lightweight to it. So if I have caffeine, I'm freaking out, like I'm buzzing off the walls, and then like super high level energy, and then probably 2 3 hours after that it's a huge crash, and then basically the rest of my day is kind of ruined.
You're like a
My
child with
crash is
sugar.
so hard. Yeah, exactly. That's a perfect way to put it.
Um,
Exactly like that.
and you're in Ottawa. Is there much of a coffee scene there?
Yeah, I mean, everyone I talk to is obsessed with coffee, and Starbucks is on every corner. And
Yeah.
yeah, I wouldn't say it's like a massive coffee scene or anything like that, but if it is, I'm not involved in it, right? So I wouldn't know anyways.
Yeah, you're on the outside looking in, like through the window.
Exactly. I mean, anytime I like go to a gym or meet up with some buddies or something like that, they always have a coffee on hand. And every person's house you go to, they have a coffee machine.
Yeah.
For me, that's I went through a phase where I tried to have some coffee because I love it. I enjoy the taste of it, and I love the smell. The smell of it
Yeah.
is the
Have you
most
tried
amazing thing.
decaf?
No, I haven't tried decaf. I
There's
should
your
though.
there's your in. That's your slow taper up. You just have
Yeah,
like a year of
exactly.
decaf and then slowly start creeping up.
Yeah. It really doesn't make any sense though, because I used to take pre-workout, and
Oh yeah, that's weird.
yeah, I don't know, maybe it's because I would be training right after it, so it would use a lot of the energy that it would give me. I
Yeah.
haven't really paid much attention to it, so I just try to avoid it just because of how it makes me feel.
Yeah, that's bad. Um, I was interested to see you helmed your own podcast. I see a massive mic mid shot there in the screen. So it was Beyond Movement. Is that like was that a lockdown thing? Was that like a project to kind of eat up some time, kind of when you were stuck?
Yeah, exactly. The world shut down, and I've always been really passionate about personal growth, especially over the last few years with growing Primal. It's kind of forced me to become something bigger than I used to be.
Hmm.
And because of that, I've just become very passionate about it, very curious about it, and like in the sense that what makes somebody great versus somebody who's not reaching their goals. It was just basically a big project just to see, is this something that I want to do in terms of like running a podcast? And it turned out that it was a huge time commitment. And even though I had a company kind of running it for me, massive time commitment. And, Primal's been growing steadily over the last 16 months, especially over the last 8 months. And it was kind of eating up into that. So I wasn't able to continue to kind of devote time to it because it was going to start either taking away time from my family or time from Primal. And I wasn't willing to justify that.
Yeah, that's interesting. Maybe I just don't give a shit about time being taken away from teaching or like my focus on school or something. Maybe that's maybe that's what my issue is. Do you listen to a lot of podcasts then?
I do. Yeah, I've been recently listening to more like finance podcasts. I like a lot of, as I said, kind of like personal growth stuff, just like trying to navigate the waters of my own anxiety from my previous life. And it's weird when I say it like that, but yeah, a lot of like personal growth stuff, finance podcasts. And then I've started diving into yours since we started chatting, and I've been loving that one. So
Yeah.
yeah, a lot of different kind of variety as well, like fitness stuff, um,
Do you ever
personal
find
growth,
yourself, because
finance.
obviously if you have I guess, a heightened understanding of a very specific area of fitness, like, do you ever find yourself listening to fitness podcasts being, like shouting at your headphones, being like, no, that's wrong. That's not like, you're not telling the right thing.
I don't think so. Not on podcasts.
Yeah,
I think for a lot of things, I'm on social media too, so I see it all day. Basically, people
yeah.
talking about things that I wouldn't necessarily agree with, but also at the same time, I don't. I'm very open minded, so I don't believe that my approach and our approach at Primal is the only approach. All I know is that our approach is very effective.
If you see someone hawking like something that you don't agree with, like that factually is incorrect, do you just like avoid, like breeze past it and like not give it a second thought, or are you ever tempted to be like, I'm going to comment on this and just say like, this isn't scientifically correct?
I like to try and have the discussion. I think that having that communication can just better the community as a whole.
Hmm.
And maybe that person has something to tell me that I haven't quite thought of, and can offer me a different perspective as well, which is super valuable to me. And I'm constantly trying to learn and grow as a coach and a leader to my team as well. And it never hurts to have a discussion like that. So, and we have a team as well of physical therapists on my team, and then CrossFit coaches, all sorts of different like demographics within my coaching team,
Yeah.
and we have discussions on things all the time too. And I'm constantly learning from my team and constantly trying to give education as well.
And is with your own background, then so did you have like an active youth, or is like physical activity something you found later in life?
Yeah, it was definitely something later. Like as a kid, it was mostly like school sports, nothing super crazy. I was doing a lot of skateboarding as a kid. Um, just generally being a kid, doing dumb things. And,
What kind of
my,
skateboarding were you doing? Were you just like pissing around in a park, or were you serious about it?
oh, I was just pissing around. Yeah, for sure. I was never any good.
Because I was watching the Olympics yesterday, and I skateboarding's in the Olympics now, and like it's fucking insane what they're able to do. Like it's crazy. And
Yeah.
then the commentator, I think I understood it correctly. He was like, they get points for doing whatever they do, but they also get points for like how they appear to do what they're doing. So if they're like, basically, if they look apathetic about it, if they look like they don't give a shit, they get more points. Like, so
Style points.
yeah, like if they land and they're like, holy crap, I can't believe I did that, or like they'll get less points than if they just like slowly nod and like drift away.
It's ridiculous. Yeah, it's style points, right? Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, anytime like I watched some highlights from the Olympics for the skateboarding, and I never would have attempted any of that. I
Yeah.
was way too scared of hurting myself.
It's an interesting one though, like I've never, like obviously I've seen people skateboard, and I think like everyone, I played Tony Hawk when I was like 12
Mm.
on the PS1 or whatever. But like having seen skateboarding for basically the first time as a sporting endeavor on TV, within like 20 seconds, I was an expert. I was like, oh, I cannot believe he tried the reverse ollie flip. Like, I was instantly annoyed at what they were doing on the screen. Like, it made me think of like me who can't do a handstand push up properly, like slagging off Noah Olsen because he can't do one off like a massive deficit. It's like, oh, come on, Noah, get your head out of your ass. And it's like, I can't even do one in the gym. Like, it's like, yeah, I think sport when you're a kid or even as a spectator, it's very different from the reality of what is actually experienced. Um, you mentioned earlier on then a previous life. What did you mean when you said that?
Uh, so before I got into fitness, my lifestyle was extremely different. Priorities were all around partying, alcohol. So I kind of like, it's weird when I say a previous life because that sounds cheesy and ridiculous, but it's like, it's because I'm just such a different person from what I was.
Was this like college
Um,
years, like that type of age, or?
yeah, it was, yeah, basically like from graduating high school and even that last year of high school all the way to probably 26 years old,
Okay.
25, 26, something like that.
And like no interest in physical, like conditioning or strength or anything like that at that time?
Well, I started getting into fitness. It wasn't until I kind of started taking fitness more seriously and using it as an opportunity to um, build a career and dive into a passion of something that I've never felt before. Like before fitness came along and before I started training and actually just being so passionate about it, there was nothing that I could find that I was genuinely interested in.
Hmm.
So yeah, like before that, it was just kind of like I'm just training, enjoying it, and learning a little bit more about it. But I never kind of left the scene that I was a big part of at that time, which was a lot of partying stuff.
Yeah. So you were kind of, uh, it's like that out training a bad diet thing. You were just kind of running away
Yeah,
from, yeah, using your
exactly.
fitness to run away from your problems, basically.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and so did you start out as a PT and then kind of hone in on mobility and like movement afterwards, or was mobility and movement always the focus from the beginning?
No, it was basically like when I first got into training, it was all just like bro days, bro sesh. Every workout was like just, the glory muscles, chest, biceps, shoulders, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And then it was, yeah. And I started getting more interested in like full body stuff, learning more about anatomy. And then I became a personal trainer and did that for a few years. And then it wasn't until I started really kind of dealing with my own pains, my own injuries and stuff like that, that I started getting a much deeper interest in, like, the passion wasn't there yet, but the interest was there because I was doing all sorts of foam rolling, all sorts of static stretching and, joint mobilizations, other stuff that I was seeing all over the internet. And it would give me kind of like instant relief towards my pains. And it like I would do this for months on end, and I wasn't seeing sustainable results that would justify the effort that I was putting towards it. So I was starting to get frustrated. And
Mm.
it wasn't until I started applying new things and then started taking more courses that the passion really started to build around it. Because I was dealing with ongoing shoulder injuries, dislocations. My left shoulder dislocated 7+ times. I had sciatic pain. I had a brutal hip impingement. I couldn't squat anywhere near parallel for like a year. So I was just looking for answers pretty much. And once I started taking
How did
more
you dislocate your
courses,
shoulder so many times?
oh, it started when I was 16 in gym class and then just like progressively
Okay, yeah.
got worse to the
Also,
point where
like
I could
it
like
never healed
swim.
properly the first time, kind of thing.
No, exactly. I
Yeah,
was lucky I didn't absolutely need surgery. I was able to escape that.
yeah, that's crazy. Um, how far away were we then at that point to say like developing an interest in, I guess, like fixing your own problems, or like you saw a hole in your own arsenal, I suppose, that you needed to fill. I guess a kind of a selfish one where you need to fix your own problems, and then that led, I suppose, to like, geez, if I need to do this, other people need to do this. But then, how far away were we from, say, that moment of realization to setting up Primal Mobility? Then,
It's been an interesting process because none of it was like, oh, this is the correct approach to take. I was just always following kind of my biggest interest, my biggest passion at the
yeah,
time. I've like always really been into the fitness scene, and growing within that, but it wasn't until I started creating my own little pathway and niche into mobility, flexibility, range of motion in general that I started really kind of going down that road. So what it was that I started taking courses because I needed answers and I knew that it would benefit my craft. I
yeah.
knew I would become a better coach, personal trainer because of it. And then once I started seeing results with the stuff and um, kind of getting more answers to my own problems, that's when I started kind of diving deeper into it and like carving out that niche for myself. So I started out with fascial stretch therapy. I'm not sure if you're familiar with what that is.
Go on.
Um, it's an interesting practice. It's like a table-based practice where it sounds intense. There's straps on the table, and you essentially strap the person to the table and take one of their limbs through various planes of motion to elicit different varying stretches.
That took a left
And
turn that I was not expecting immediately.
yeah, it does sound very intense. But what that is a very passive approach to stretching. It's basically like it's having somebody else stretch you, right?
Also, you're strapped
So
down, so like, because like I'm picturing, say, a hamstring stretch. If you move one leg, the other leg will automatically compensate, like
Right.
start lifting up. So it just stops that happening, basically, is it?
Exactly. So it allows you to get a deeper stretch.
So do you must have to be really aware of like there's surely a point of no return there where you could just go like too far on someone who
Yeah,
isn't. Yeah.
it could be dangerous for sure. So you have to be very like you have to be paying attention completely and looking for specific cues that the person's body should be giving you.
Yeah.
You have to go slow regardless. But anyways, it's a very passive approach, and that's where it all kind of started for me. So I loved that, and that kind of had me diving even deeper into anatomy and the fascia, and the approach that it was very passive. So the results were insane and fast, but they didn't last.
Yeah.
And that's what was frustrating at first. But anyway, so that kind of had me diving into it and becoming more passionate and interested in it. And then from there, I completely stopped personal training, opened up my own studio, and I just dove right into that. That was all I was offering because it was a specific niche for me. So I saw that as a business opportunity, but it was also something that I was just more passionate about because it was just so quick. The
Yeah.
results were instant.
Is it a
And
hard
so,
sell? Because obviously, like, you mentioned the word niche there a few times, and it's so there's a lot of like nooks and crannies in the fitness industry, I suppose, and like the maybe the easier sells are like nutrition, where like because a lot of people are quick to realize that they're fucking up their food and they need help with it or they need advice, and then like PT would be another one, like say basic strength and conditioning, or say in CrossFit like gymnastics coaching or whatever. Like there's those like kind of glaring holes that people have, but mobility is often the last box that people are willing to tick because it's not like sparkly. Do you know, it's not fun. It's not like, oh, this is like look at all the progress I'm seeing, unless you're like, I want to do the splits or something. Like it's a very niche aspect in the fitness industry. So was it a hard sell at the start to kind of get it off the ground, like to convince people that this is something that they need to do?
yeah, when I transitioned from in person to strictly online, that's where things were. It was an insanely hard sell at first. I remember I transitioned from in person to online, and it took me about a month. So I was promoting and promoting and promoting, and then when I launched, I had 4 clients. So I was super excited about those new 4 clients that came on. And then 4 months later, I had 3 clients, and I was like, fuck. I was freaking out, man. I was like, I think I made a huge mistake because I had dropped everything in person. I was like, nope, online is the way to go. And this is how I'm going from here on out. And I just dove all my eggs into that basket. And I was freaking out. I was like, I can't pay my car. I can't pay my mortgage. I have 2 kids, and I'm going to have to go to Walmart and get a job or something like that, go to McDonald's. And then out of nowhere, it kind of just blew up. So the way I started was like $100 a month. Like my services were really cheap. And at this point, I always make a joke that mobility coaches are always the last to join the party. As you said, fitness coaching and nutrition, those are things that people see as a top priority, right? And then a lot of people don't even know that mobility coaching is a thing. We kind of join the party once people are looking for answers for their pain.
Yeah.
When they're pushing a barbell overhead and their shoulders are bugging out, or their low back hurts when they're squatting, or hip is pinching. That's where we jump in, and people will generally say, "I've been following ROMWOD or GOWOD or something like that, and it's gotten me this far. It's been amazing. I just need something that's a little bit more detailed." And that's what we do, right? Like we're a coaching company. So we provide answers into like the deeper root cause of people's issues as opposed to the symptom that's coming up.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a hard sell in the sense that people don't necessarily know it's a thing. And people don't necessarily know they want it until they're at a point where they feel they need it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I suppose like I know I found you through Emma Lawson. So she's probably your most well-known client, I guess. And well, when this comes out, she'll have taken to the floor at Madison um in the age group for the last time, I think. So like when you work with someone who obviously there's a benefit there because it's like a large audience, like a lot of eyes. So that's like great for getting the word out. But then, like, is it difficult to work with someone who it has been athletic for so long and from such a young age and performing at such a high level? Or like, is it more about like tweaking and fine tuning small little things that, like, say, you might notice that will pay off further down the line, but if most not mobility focused coaches would see it, to be no real alarm bells from it, but you can see like, okay, you're doing this tiny thing that we need to fix, because when you go to try and snatch like 90 kilos, it's going to be an issue, or that kind of thing? Or is it still the same process of everything needs to be loose, everything needs to be fluid, regardless of what level you're working at?
Yeah, I would say, it's always going to vary on the individual as well. Like Emma Lawson is a phenomenal, not only a phenomenal athlete, but just a great person in general as well.
Hmm.
She's 16 years old and has such a great head on her shoulders. So she knows a lot about her body and, what she's doing, and she's just fully invested in her experience. So she can be there to give me a lot of insight into her body and a lot of feedback on our programming to make sure that we are addressing the problems that she's feeling. But she, like her coach and her, have been working on some certain things for quite some time. And there's certain things that seem to flare up for her every 5 to 6 months or something
Yeah.
like
Okay.
that, which is a good kind of insight for me as to what might be going on. And again, we dive deeper into the root cause, right? So this, let's say, low back pain doesn't necessarily mean that low back is the issue, right? Perhaps it's the pelvic positioning or hip extension is the issue. So we like, or even ankle stability, right? Depending on when you start to feel those pains. So every time somebody comes to us with, especially at that high level with an issue, we need to kind of take a step back and have a look at what's going on. Full assessment needs to be done, of course, but we can't just kind of jump the gun on everything and just assume that everything needs to be loose, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of the time it's mostly stability and just control is the issue.
And then like I've spoken to people who have done, like high level, they've done like strength and conditioning courses, like fairly intense and long courses, or they've done, their level 2 or their level 3 with CrossFit, which are, like uh have a fairly high fail rate. So that they're pretty stringent about who they let through. And like a lot of these courses ask people to assess someone's movement or to look at, like to give tips. And I remember one of my friends was telling me he was doing it, and someone was doing a push jerk, and he said that the coach made them do it like 40 times, and he was like, it was just soul destroying, because he said, I fixed, like, starting at the toes, working my way up, I fixed like 10 different things. And she was like, every time he said, oh, now do this, and then no, that's not it, and then he'd be like, oh, what, like? And he was like, in the end, there was just the smallest, it was a push jerk, I think he was coaching, and there was the smallest use of arms before the legs had locked out, and that's what she was picking up on. And now afterwards, they were like, it was perfect coaching. It's just you always need to strive for better, basically. But I've talked to other people who, in a strength and conditioning course, the lead coach might be watching them coach someone else, and they'd be the head coach would be picking up on like the smallest little bit of toe movement on the little toe on the left foot or something. And whereas as a coach, I suppose your eye is drawn to like knees, hips, like chest, like the kind of I suppose those red warning signs that I talked about earlier, like maybe the easier things to fix. Like when you're assessing people, or when you're even just like in a gym, are you like, oh, that guy's ankle there is like something wrong with his ankle, or like, oh, her shoulders, whatever? Like, do you start off with, say, the massive issues first, and then eventually you're working on those little toe movements and stuff?
Yeah, it totally depends on what the person is coming to me for and with. If they're talking to me about a specific issue, then I kind of reverse engineer it from there. And the body has a way of kind of puzzling things together when there's an issue, right? So certain problems often are led from other specific things. And you kind of would start there. And if that's not the issue, then you kind of just continue down the chain, right? So a lot of people will see problems that stem from the ankles, and they don't even realize it, right? So Yeah, I mean, and I'm a sucker for the human body. So when I'm seeing somebody in the gym or something that's not moving optimally, like for what they're trying to do, um, and I want to, I kind of hesitate to say something like that because I'm a big believer that I don't think there's necessarily any wrong movement. It's just that there's lack of preparedness for it.
Yeah.
I can dive in a little bit deeper on that if you want, but I'm always catching myself looking at someone and being like, oh, that guy would really benefit from stabilizing his ankles, or strengthening his dorsiflexion or something like
Yeah.
that. And is it, you know what I mean? So yeah, it's kind of a blessing and a curse. And oh my god, my daughter was born with clubbed feet. I'll tell you, man, that's that one. I thought I was gonna freak out when she was born. I thought her feet were the cutest little things, but now every time I look at her when she's walking, I'm just seeing the instability in her ankles, and I'm like, oh, I can't wait until you're old enough to start taking cues, because we're gonna start working on that right away. It's
Yeah.
hard not to pay attention to these types of things, right?
Yeah. But even like my own daughter, when when she was learning to walk, we were like, why are her toes turned in? Like, should we be, like, and it's like, just
Yeah.
maybe leave them for a little while. And like, but you kind of, yeah, you can't help but, I suppose, be a bit of a perfectionist about it, especially when they're learning to walk. But I think that comes from, especially when you're an adult, and then if you find training, and if you find fitness later on in life, I always think you've probably made so many fuck ups throughout your life that have led to like inconsistencies now and annoyances now and niggles now and stuff, that you're like, man, if I could go back to when I was like 12 to when I started rounding my shoulders, I'd be like, if I could just like pat myself in the back and be like, don't fucking do that, you regret it.
Oh man, yeah, and lifestyle, like our lifestyle habits play a huge part in how our body moves as well, right? Especially those for like desk workers,
I was
people
gonna
who sit
say,
down for
like,
a long period of time.
I was thinking, so the last like 18 months, I guess, more and more people are working from home, and like a lot of people are working from home in what would you call it, like rooms or scenarios that are like suboptimal for working. So they might be working with their laptop on their lap, which, like the name would suggest, it's like, designed for, but apparently it's not. Or they might be like, have their laptop on like a kid's desk or on a vanity table or on the kitchen table or wherever. Like, these are, you know they seem fine, but then over time, if the laptop is slightly lower than it should be, you're going to like round, I guess, or hunch. Um, and then like things like chairs, like what kind of chair you're sitting in, how long you're sitting in it for. And I thought of a random one the other day of like phones. Like, so like if someone's on their phone, they never have it like up. It's always down, which I suppose like will draw your shoulders down. And then especially a lot of people use their phone in one hand. So surely like their whole body, if they're right-handed, say their whole body, a lot of the time, if they're on their phone, is going to be slightly shifted to one side. And like one shoulder is going to be forward and one is going to be back. Like, are you noticing changes in the issues people are bringing, say, even in that small of a window, even in the last like 18 months? Or do you think that the issues that people have are always consistent, but the causes of the issues might change?
The causes of the issues have started a long time ago.
Yeah.
The fact that we need like ergonomic chairs, ergonomic mouses, and desks and everything is kind of a crazy thought, right? Like, I think it's Kelly Starrett who says sitting is the new smoking. It really does break down your body incredibly quickly. And I would say, yeah, you're right. Definitely, the over the last 18 months with the pandemic and people being forced to work from home, there's a lot more people sitting for more extended periods of time, and even partaking less in fitness and movement in general.
Hmm.
Um, but I would say that those problems it's an accumulative thing. It's compounded over time. We're going to start to see the effects of those problems probably within the next year, as they're going to start to accumulate quicker now, right? But those problems have been around for a long time now, and I don't think that we've necessarily noticed that they're getting worse. They're just it's hard to say, simply because our company is growing and more people are becoming aware of us now as well. So we're starting to see more people that are desk workers and passionate about their fitness. in general.
And
So I can't really speak to the point of.
what would be the answer? Like, is standing desk then? Is that the logical solution to having, like, requiring a desk to do your job, but not wanting to lead to issues further down the line? Is the quickest solution to just not sit down then?
No, I don't think like sitting for an extended period of time is what's bad.
Okay.
Doing anything for an extended period of time is not really great for your body. Our bodies they thrive off of movement, right? So I would say the answer is if you don't have a stand-up desk, stand-up desk is a phenomenal option for sure because you can get up and sit down. If you don't have one, get out of your chair every 30 minutes and just open up your hips. Rotate your spine a little bit. Even just doing like a good 2-minute stretch routine, like just moving your body a little bit and opening up your joints, that's going to have a massive impact on how your body moves for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
As I said, our lifestyle habits are really what kind of make or break us. If we're sitting for 10 hours a day from work, commute to work, dinner, TV, we sit down for a long period of time, right? If you can find a way to just get more movement and open up your joints throughout the day periodically, you're going to see a much bigger impact as opposed to, just standing up.
Yeah. It's funny. I'm really fighting hard not to be like whipping out a list of issues. Just being like, what do you think is causing this? Like when you were talking about cars, I get like I'm not looking for a solution to this now. This is just like an example, I think, of what you're talking about. Like my like right knee and calf and quad, if I'm driving for a prolonged period of time, like anything over an hour, just start like seizing up. Like I get like pain in my knee. And if I, like splay my knee out, my hip clicks and it relieves it for 10, 15 minutes. And then it slowly starts again. And then I realized the other day, I'm fucked for this now in September because we have a second child arriving. But the other day I realized that if I push my chair back further, thus like stretching out that leg, because our accelerator is on the right foot, like, so if I stretch out that leg more, the issue totally like it's no longer an issue. It's because my foot is closer to, or my knee is closer to like 90 degrees, I think, for a prolonged period. That's what's causing it or whatever. But it's interesting when you think about like all of the technology we have that's designed to make our lives easier is like, I suppose, like slowly degrading different parts of our posture. And, even you think of, I mentioned the phone and then like the steering wheel, like, you're obviously going to be a little bit rounded unless you have your chair. Like who takes the time to perfectly set up their chair before they drive a car or the seat or whatever?
Yeah.
Like they're going to be a little bit rounded. So yeah, it is interesting. And then like gyms as well, they're a great place to grimace when it comes to form and posture. And I'm including myself in this, so I'm not throwing shade at anyone. But like, where do you think the majority of those issues lie? Like, is it in the movement patterns that are compounded over time, like in the gym, and aren't being fixed? Or is the damage being done away from the gym and then it's too difficult to fix? Like people skip the step of fixing it and like load instead.
Yeah, there's kind of a two-part window there. In terms of like movement patterns, movement mechanics, a lot of it doesn't necessarily stem from poor mobility. You can have
Yeah.
somebody who has great range of motion and shit movement patterns, and that's just because there's a lack of awareness and a lack of connection, right? So that neurological move, like understanding how your body's moving, that goes a long way. And a lot of people don't have that necessarily developed. A lot of that comes with experience, right? You can develop better movement mechanics, understanding how to move through a squat pattern, for example, the more you practice it.
Yeah.
And then there's also that second part where, yeah, some people it's just a lot of restrictions in certain areas in the ankles. Maybe knees don't like to get into deep flexion. Maybe they just, their hips are restricted. It's hard to say. Usually, if it's kind of more of a mechanics thing or if it's really a restriction thing, certain things will kind of tell you. But
Is that the difference that you were talking about earlier on about being prepared to move? Remember you said
yeah. So what I was saying is like I don't believe there's necessarily any bad movements. I feel like there's lack of preparedness for movements. And what I meant by that is, bad movements in the sense that there's certain things that get demonized in the fitness industry, like spinal flexion, or the knees over toes position is another good one. You know, in the gym class when you were a kid, you always heard the gym teacher saying, don't let your knees pass over your toes when you're squatting or lunging or whatever, you know what I mean? Because it's dangerous for the knees. It's only dangerous if you haven't prepared your body for that. So for example, if you're going to do a deadlift and, you know, you're trying to PR your deadlift and you've never PR'd your deadlift before, and all you've done is training perfect neutral spine position. And now in this deadlift PR, you're going for a big PR, and then your spine is now going into a flexed position. Your spine is rounding. That can be dangerous because your body has never used that position in loading. Whereas if you've trained that position, you've become more aware of how to use that position, and you've loaded it slowly and effectively, and you know, periodized it and grown into the, like a strength position, or grown that into a strength position, I should say, it's no longer dangerous, right? So that's kind of what I meant. There's lack of preparedness. I don't really see any movement as a bad movement. Our body is meant to be able to move in so many different ranges of motion.
So if you saw me deadlifting, because I round my back, like, depends. If I really, really concentrate on it, I don't. But like in general, I do. You would try and fix that, surely. That would be your first step, would be to try and fix that rather than, oh, that's fine because he's preparing himself to do it. No?
If you've been doing that that's kind of a can of worms right there. So if you've been doing that for a
I'm not
long
touching
period
that.
of time, if you've been doing it for a long period of time, you're likely very strong in that position, and you're probably stronger in that position than you are in a neutral position. So it kind of depends why you're doing it. Is it because you're restricted? If you're very restricted, sure, I will be trying to pick that apart and make sure that we can fix it so you're not doing that strictly because you're restricted in your body. Or, you know, are your goals performance related? If they are, then that's potentially energy leaks as well. So it's, as I said, it's kind of a big can of worms. It totally depends why you're rounding your back and what your goals are. So if you're kind of coming to me with tons of back pain, or, you know, tons of shoulder pain, and this is one of the big things that we're seeing, I would like to see why that's happening versus just the fact that it is
happening. Do you watch The Simpsons?
I used to. I haven't for a long time.
There's an episode where Mr. Burns is sick and he goes to hospital, and I think Dr. Hibbett says, well, if you think about everybody trying to go through one door and nobody can get in, he actually has so many diseases that none of them can affect him because none of them can get in the door because they're all trying to get in at once. That's what I think of when you say, well, I need to start picking apart why you're moving the way you're moving. I'm like, hang on a minute. All of these like mistakes I'm making are integral to me being able to stand upright and move. I feel like if you start fixing one, everything else is going to fall apart. It's like a house of cards, but the bottom row of cards are all bent, but they're bent in just the right way that it keeps the house cards up.
A lot of people, you know, will be restricted mostly in one area, or like limited in one area. And then other things are kind of an accumulation of that, right? So yes, once you start picking apart like the biggest issue, little smaller things start to climb up, and then you slowly address those over time. But that's kind of the name of the game as well, right?
I watched the Games documentary recently, and I think this will kind of play into what you were just talking about there about rounding your back and stuff, where during the total you could see like knee cave and other stuff when they were squatting, like, you know, as they were coming up, their knees were like full on touching as they're coming up, which you're always told, oh, like definitely, like, you know, it seems like a more truthful line than don't let your knees go over your toes, of like, well, there's something wrong there if that's happening. But like when you're performing at that level, is it a case of putting in the work throughout the year so that those like breakdowns in form and mobility occur later on in the, like at the highest possible level, so that, you know, it doesn't hinder their performance? Do you know, like, so that obviously if that's happening in their first rep with an empty bar, if their knees are touching, you're like, whoa, okay, never mind. Like, we need to stop doing that. Whereas when it's happening at 200 kilos or whatever, it's like, yeah, I mean, how often are they going to do that? It's probably all right. Like, they're really at the peak performance level.
Yeah, I mean, like you're referring to knee valgus, like where the knees are caving. That's such a common thing. And as you said, I think it was Tia Toomey. I remember seeing that at the last
And it
meet
was slow
where,
mo as well, so it really accentuated.
yeah, really accentuated it. So you got to see it in detail, and it was almost the point where her knees were touching.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking that doesn't look good, but she's also an elite athlete
Mm.
squatting. I think it was like was it 325 or something like
Something like that,
that?
yeah.
And she moved it easily. She didn't have any pain, and that just goes to show that she likely, when she does hit her higher numbers, she will have that movement. That's just her stronger position, right? Like her body is just more adapted to that position and pushing weight through that position. And there are studies showing that knee valgus isn't really a very dangerous thing. Right. So, I mean, again, it comes down to energy leaks as well. What is something that isn't optimal for your performance, as you said? And is it worth correcting?
Yeah.
Right. So, if you're at that level, you're obviously doing something right. And there's certain things that we're going to want to pick apart and rebuild from the foundation, and certain things that isn't worth our time because, at a level like that, she's already investing 6 hours into training a day, something like that, right?
Yeah.
So how much more do we need to add in that's really going to give her the bang for her buck in terms of investing into something like mobility, right?
Yeah. Um, yeah, I always get a bit annoyed. I can't remember the name of the account, which is probably better that I'm not going to be like calling someone out on a podcast. But there's a girl who she critiques lifts, and I know she's doing it. I know she's picking CrossFitters because it will get a reaction, but she does like say the heavy clean at the games last year or 2 years ago. There was like a 1 rep max clean, and yeah, she was like critiquing them about how, oh, they didn't set up to the bar properly, and they did this, they did that, or whatever. And like throughout, I'm kind of thinking like, but this is like their chuck it and see effort. Like this is their like, fuck it, I might get a PR if I go for this. Like, this is after like 4 days of or 3 days of really intense competition, and this is their like they're literally just like, oh fuck it, I might as well try it. And then she's like, they're not correctly braced there at the bottom, and it's kind of like, oh come on, like when you're performing at this level, surely there's a I guess like what you're saying there, that there's a certain level of like give and take where it's kind of like, okay, it's not affecting performance. It's not optimal, but it's not affecting performance. And if we did spend the amount of time it would take to fix it, might only get like 1 pound added to whatever's happening anyway.
Yeah, as you said, I mean, when they're performing at that level after four days of competing, you can't expect perfection. That's
Yeah.
kind of impossible, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Fraser was pretty good, but apart from that,
Yeah.
if you could, give the average Joe or Jane a focus for their movement, like say a general kind of catch as much as you can within a small window, if everyone had like say most people would be able to find 10 minutes in their day somewhere,
Mhm.
is there like what areas of focus would you advise people to focus on? Like are there more important parts than others? Like say if you thought of like the obvious ones you might think of are like hips, like ankles, over say wrists and chest are probably lower down on the list. Would they be? Is that fair, or do you think that it's an equal playing field as far as that's concerned?
Yeah, if I'm gonna give people advice, we have something that at Primal that we refer to as the big three in mobility, and that's ankles, hips, and thoracic spine. So if you're looking for the biggest bang for your buck in terms of how to approach your mobility, regardless of what your goals are, if you address the hips, the ankles, and the thoracic spine, you're going to see results across your body. So those areas have the biggest play in how the rest of the body moves. Like if you're looking at your ankles, you're going to be supporting the knees, the hips supporting that low back, the thoracic spine, shoulders, neck, even the low back, right? So if you address those big three areas, there's going to be progress from all sorts of angles. And I wouldn't at Primal Mobility, our focus is a strength-based approach. We put people into a stretched position and then have them put in work there. So activating their muscles, developing control of those deep end ranges of motion, and developing a connection, right? Understanding that you can use these ranges of motion. And that's something that I would suggest implementing into your mobility work. Don't necessarily think that mobility is foam rolling or just static stretching. You need to be able to understand that mobility is the presence of strength within your flexibility. So you need to have those deep ranges of motion, and you need to know how to use them. So when it comes to the ankles, hips, and thoracic, get into those stretch positions and then activate your muscles, connect to those deeper ranges of motion and use them.
Yeah. End range of motion with force of light sounds like my worst fucking nightmare, to be honest. But yeah, I could definitely see the benefit of it, because even like I think back to myself, I remember like overhead squatting with a dowel back. Our gym had a different layout at the time. Like I can vividly remember myself standing where I was standing, and like nothing was happening. And then like, you know, trying it with a bar and sit, like I was being forced into the position because the bar is heavier than the stick. Like, so
Right.
the bar was a bit more in control than I was. So you just kind of push down, I suppose. But again, it was like, oh, am I getting to parallel? It's kind of like nearly, like, you know, and then now like my squat is better than it ever has been for the last like, you know, maybe 6 months. It's just been vastly improved because I've just spent time down there. I've like, you know, stripped the weight back and forced myself to be down there for longer and stayed down there and stuff. And it, like, you know, what you're saying resonates of that thing of like, okay, you need to be in the position that you want to be in, and then you need to like stay there, spend some time there, and apply some pressure there to keep you there. Because, you know, I've often had like our gym is very good for doing like, say, move better at the start of every class. Like there's a few little like kind of movement based warm-ups, like, you know, the buck stretch and a few little bits like that thrown in, like to kind of teach us them, I suppose. And they did a lot of flexibility stuff over lockdown. And like I remember a year and a half ago, like doing a movement, and my coach, like Joe, saying to me like, oh, can you feel your glutes firing? And I was like, I don't know, like they're there, but what do you mean? Can I feel? How do I ask them? Like, what do I do to ascertain that information from them? And it comes down to that, like what you're saying of the experience, I suppose, where you just develop like, oh, that's what that feels like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's awareness and connection, right? And that's like one of the pillars that we follow as well, or that we implement into our work, is helping our members develop a deeper awareness and connection. Now,
Mm,
awareness is basically understanding how your body moves, understanding the compensations that you're going through for whatever reason, be it restrictions or just weakness. And then connection is being able to connect to your body, firing your muscles in those deeper ranges of motion or in generally weaker areas.
mm,
And something that we say is, you know, whatever your goal is, if you spend more time, in the positions that you want to improve, just like you said. So as you, like, a great example is that squat depth. If you want to improve your squat, spend more time sitting in a deep squat and trying to turn your body on in that position. And over time, that position will, and it won't take very long, few weeks maybe, that position will start to get more comfortable. You'll
mm.
feel more stable, more confident in there, and it will improve. And that's kind of the concept that we bring into our work, is get you into positions that your body generally doesn't go into and start to get you comfortable there by getting you to spend more time and work in those deeper positions. So
You,
one thing I wanted to bring up real quick is
yeah.
that a lot of people don't understand that mobility really is control. It's controlling your ranges of motion, right? So you can absolutely improve your mobility through your training as well. Like just like, for example, like tempo squats, sinking deeper and controlling into as deep as you can into that deep squat position. That's going to help you improve your mobility over time, is like controlling into those ranges of motion, or actively working through an overhead squat. Sorry. Controlling into a deep overhead squat position is going to help you open up and stabilize your shoulders into a deeper range of motion. And just like how your body adapts to heavier and heavier squats, your body also adapts very similarly to deeper and deeper ranges of motion.
Yeah.
So, like, you don't always need to dedicate a crazy amount of time to mobility. You just need to start being intentional with how you're moving, and that in itself goes a very long way.
Yeah, like it's interesting because in improving my squat depth, I never actually did anything differently outside of how I was squatting. Like I never, focused, I never like foam rolled differently. I never stretched differently. I never warmed up differently. I just squatted differently. And then because I was doing that, it kind of played into my, like the warm ups. Say we do like a hip complex at the start of our warm up, started to feel easier and easier because of what I was doing when I was squatting. So it kind of had, I suppose, what most people would expect to be the converse effect of like, it should be the warm up that in your head, like it should be the warm up that's having an effect on the work that you're doing. Whereas my reality was the work I was doing was making the warm up easier because my hips were able to get into positions because they were being forced into positions like when I was doing the work.
Yeah, as your mobility improves, your warm-ups should be a lot easier too, right? Like you won't
Yeah.
need as much time to warm up, and you know that also leads to better recovery because you're not placing as much unnecessary stress on your joints,
Yeah.
right? Like imagine pushing into an overhead position, but you don't have good thoracic extension or shoulder flexion. Your shoulders have to hold so much stronger, and your low back is going to have to compensate to get into a good effective position. You're placing unnecessary stress on your body. So as you improve your mobility, your recovery naturally improves as well, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. Um, You mentioned on the Primal Mobility website, like one of the first lines you see when you log on is foam rollers and lacrosse balls don't work. Um, I assume it's what you've mentioned of the static uh, stretching and like how there's a better way to do things or a more long term way to do things. Is there a place for um like massage guns, lacrosse balls, like that kind of thing in mobility? Do you think?
There's definitely a place for these tools. They're absolutely not necessary. There's a place for them mostly in recovery.
Yeah,
So these are, I would definitely put these things more along the lines of into recovery tools than mobility tools. They are classified in mobility tools. That's what everyone calls them. But essentially, when it comes to foam rolling, massage guns, stuff like that, they do provide a temporary opening of flexibility. So you will increase your ranges of motion for a very short period of time, and that's where it's not necessarily a mobility tool because you're not building any strength control within those ranges of motion. They're just kind of opening things up, and your body's going to kind of shut them back down over time,
yeah,
right? So mobility, we want to open things up and then develop strength and awareness into those positions, control, stability, all these good things so that they last a longer period of time and they're not just shutting that window again.
yeah. What could a member of Primal expect to experience, and I suppose walk away with at the end of their membership?
We So our big approach is to help our members develop a much deeper relationship with their body. So a lot of people will be coming in with complaints of certain symptoms, and we help them dive in and understand their body as to what's causing those symptoms. What is the root cause, that deeper root cause that is having those symptoms flare up? I want our members to understand that and learn more about their body. And then from there, we teach them how to address that. So one, the people coming in, they can expect to learn why their body is causing these symptoms, why they have these goals, and then two, understand how to approach it on a deeper level with ranges of motion, control, strength, and stability exercises.
So is the aim then to make uh, kind of counterintuitively, I suppose, to make yourself obsolete for the client that you take on over time?
Yes, absolutely. 100%. In my opinion, that's a service that's very, very valuable. And that's something we're always striving for. As I said, we've grown a lot over the last year and a half, especially. And we've changed our approach 3 times in terms of how we program, in terms of how we support our members. And we're constantly building up to that next level of how can we get people their answers even faster.
Hmm.
And that just makes us more valuable as a company, in my opinion. And that's always the goal. Yeah, we're very member oriented. very focused on providing the highest level of service and getting you those answers as quick as we can, while also making sure it's sustainable. Right. So we have members that come in and they just love it, and they don't have to think about their mobility work. They just sign in and go. And they'll stick around for a long period of time. And then there's some other members that just want to hop in, get their answers, and move on. And, we respect that as well. So we're there to continue to provide the highest level we can and give people the answers that they're looking for in their body. And if they understand their body on a deeper level, 5-10 years down the road, when something's bothering them, they'll be able to address it more effectively on their own, as opposed to having to hire another mobility coach, come back to us, or even go see a PT if things get worse, right? A physical therapist.
Okay, well, look, we finished with a quick fire. So snatch or clean?
Cleans.
Push press or bench press?
Push press.
Best hip mobility drill?
Anything hip extension related.
Okay, so like couch stretch, like that kind of thing?
Yes.
Okay.
Or let me back up. Internal rotation is just as important as hip extension. So the thing is, if I give you a name of an exercise, you're not going to know what I'm talking about. So
try me.
All right, let's go as simple as possible. Just some basic 90-90 work then.
Oh, I know that.
Yeah, that's a
I know some stuff,
one, right?
I just because I don't implement it doesn't mean I don't know it.
So if you want to get a little bit more creative, then like some 90-90 internal hip rotation, like Pale's rails. That's actively developing ranges of motion as opposed to just kind of passively stretching.
Okay. Assault bike or row?
Rower.
Yeah. I'm just thinking on the last one there, you could have just made up something and I would have just glossed over it. I was just like, yeah.
Maybe I
moved
did.
on.
Yeah, exactly.
Best shoulder mobility drill?
Dead hangs.
Yeah. I'm always in awe of Tim Poulsen is the best I've seen do it, where he hangs like single armedly. Single armed from so he hangs with both and he just lets one go and like just like he's a heavy guy, like, and he just totally fine. He's spinning everything, he's just totally fine. I've tried it and I like let go of one side and instantly just dropped to the ground. So like, yeah, I think that's probably something you need to build up to. Run or ski?
Run.
Dumbbell or barbell?
Barbell.
Best ankle mobility drill?
Dorsiflexion, Pale's rails.
All right, just explain Pale's rails to me because you've said it twice now, and I pretended I knew what it was the first time.
So yeah. So it stands for progressive angular isometric loading and regressive angular isometric loading. So it's a real fancy way of saying get into the deep stretch of dorsiflexion. So I'm not sure if you're
also
familiar
like
with that position.
On a bench and put like say a kettlebell on your knee and push forward, like that kind of thing.
That's a classic dorsiflexion stretch. Yeah. So pushing your knee far over your toes, that's dorsiflexion position for the ankle. And then from there, in that deep position, you go through your Pale's contraction, which is pressing on the gas pedal, and then your rails contraction, which is pulling your toes up to try and touch the top of your foot to your shin.
Okay.
So you're activating both the lengthened portion of the muscle and the shortened portion of the muscle, the joint at the front.
Okay, that's interesting. I can actually picture something you said there, so that's good.
Hopefully I painted a good picture there.
Yeah, no, I can get it. Yeah. So you're upside down. No, I'm joking.
Those are dead hangs.
Yeah. So listen, thanks a million for coming on. That was great. Best of luck with everything Primal Mobility related. I hope your growth continues as you've experienced it over the last 12 to 18 months. And you keep going from strength to strength. And yeah, I could pretend that we know how Emma did, but we're recording this before the games actually happened. So that could, like, unless we recorded two alternative outcomes, but that would be a bit tricky. But yeah, I'm sure she'll benefit from what you guys have been doing. And yeah, thanks again. This is great.
Yeah, man. Thanks a lot for having me. This is a good conversation. I'm stoked to watch the games and see how our athletes are doing. Cause yeah, so we're working with Emma Lawson and Emily Rolfe right now.
Okay.
So I'm very excited to see
God,
how
Emily
these
Rolfe,
girls
she's
do.
really gone all in because she she has like a mindset coach as well this year. So she's
Yeah,
really gone in.
she has gone in for sure. I feel like this is a really good year for her. She's invested a ton of time, energy, and effort into all of this. So I think she's going to go and perform at a really high level this year.
Yeah, that's exciting to see.
And Emma Lawson, you can expect to she's going to do some really, really big things over the next few years for sure.
Yeah, I don't think that's a name that's going anywhere. I actually remember, I'm 99.9% sure it was her. We were at the games in Madison in 2019, and there was a girl from Canada training the day before the games were on in the park, doing a run, like a loop run around the park, and then swimming. And it was like there was a guy there who I was like, it's either her coach or her dad, I'm not sure. And then like there was another younger girl, like I assumed like a sister or else the coach's kid or whatever. But yeah, I remember being like, Jesus, that person is incredibly fit, assuming it was like a 20-year-old. And then I realized afterwards that like, oh no, that was a teen athlete. And yeah, I'm 99.9. My wife is convinced it was her. I'm not as convinced. But yeah, I mean, if that was her at whatever 14, like geez, it's actually scary when you think of what they could be capable of further down the line.
Yeah, the teen athletes at this point in the game are just on another level, and it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, they're really raising the bar lately. And Emma Lawson is right up there, man. Like she's totally got what it takes.
Yeah.